The official topic for today's video is the grace of giving and receiving. Giving and receiving. Great, perfect time of year to talk about it, right? But we can hardly talk about that without talking about the elephant in the room. Are you a giver or a taker in disguise? It may not be as simple as you think. So this time, I want you to watch the video for clues about you. Clues for your own self-awareness. The kind of clues where you might be tempted to say, oh, that's so-and-so. But this time, be willing to consider, is that me? Oh my gosh, that is so me. So I'm going to drop clues throughout the video, and I'm not going to call them out. You get to find them on your own, and I'm ready for it. I got my morning mocha smoothie and fuel, and I'm ready. You ready? All right, let's get going. What really started this, other than just this is the season? So I was scrolling through Facebook, or I don't know, maybe it was Instagram. But anyway, I saw 4 posts, and all 4 were complaining about holiday gift giving. The first one I saw was this she was furious about angel tree giving. She had heard from somebody who had heard from somebody who had heard from somebody that most angel tree gifts got exchanged after Christmas, and she was livid. I mean, how dare they exchange them after all the time and money she had spent? She was never going to support any other angel tree ever again. Yeah, that's what she was thinking. I think the next one I saw was a woman. I believe she was a grandmother, but she was really upset because gift giving had become competitive in her family, and she felt like they were stealing the meaning and joy of Christmas, that it was getting buried under the whole self-interest of competition, and the children weren't learning, and the adults didn't care, and it was just ruining her joy. Her whole post was about how disgusted she was with her family's behavior. Disgusted. The third one, this one was, she was just reeling. She was just like reeling from the overgiving of one relative. And the person who had posted this was saying that this relative was using gift giving as a way to manipulate everybody. That she held it over people's heads, and that she had all these expectations about how you should reciprocate and how grateful you should be. And the woman who posted, she was literally feeling suffocated by all the implied obligations. And then the last one was criticizing a young woman, a young mother, whose child had become gravely ill, and they weren't really in a position, their family was not really in a position financially to take on a sudden, big illness. And she had this young mother had just received an outpouring of support from her community. And now that her child was better, she wanted to set up an organization to help other young mothers in similar situations. Well, maybe not an organization. She wanted to figure out something to help other young mothers in similar situations. Now, according to the person writing this post, that young mother was just trying to capitalize on her situation. She probably wanted to profit from it. Think about those examples. I am going to give you a clue this time. Have you ever felt like the first one, resentful that you had given somebody something and then maybe they exchanged it, or, whatever, they didn't really like it? Or gift giving had become a competition and you were thinking, well, I would not do that, and I don't want to see it like that, and I want to see the real spirit of giving. And the third one, what if you were the one who was overgiving? And what if it was coming from a place of your own neediness, your own, I need to overcompensate for not feeling so good about myself. And the young mother, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. I applaud people who are on the receiving end of, just outpourings of help and whatever they need, and then turn around and say, I want to pay it forward. But that wasn't the attitude of this person posting. So what each of these examples has in common, besides the people posting having that little, Grinch-sized heart that's many sizes too small, is that the balance of giving and receiving has been lost. It's been subverted. Because each of those people posting thought that she was doing giving right and those other people were not. Instead of paving the way for greater connection, open-heartedness, more unity, giving in these posts had become a source of division. It was sort of that old my way or the highway. Now, my guess is that none of these people realized that by harboring anger and disgust and criticism and manipulation and kind of letting them fester, they're hurting themselves. And maybe they're hurting themselves more than anyone else. They've skewed or maybe even lost their sense of reciprocity. And by doing that, they're constricting their own ability to receive, and they're keeping themselves out of balance. Reciprocity. Boy, that's a really key word when it comes to giving and receiving. Giving and receiving are designed to be a symbiotic, mutually beneficial exchange. A balanced, mutually beneficial exchange, giving and receiving and giving. But a lot of us were taught only one side. We were taught giving, but too often we were taught it sort of framed as like self-sacrifice. Or maybe it was the opposite, giving the best gift, And there was very little about the art and grace of receiving, how to receive graciously, which is not the same as writing a formulaic little thank you note. Nothing wrong with those. I taught my children. We all try. But more important than the thank you note is teaching them how to have a heart to receive graciously. Do we have a heart to receive graciously? Are we a little embarrassed when we're on the receiving end? And, as a result of all that false teaching, self-sacrifice, giving the best gift, whatever it was, what happens is we end up suspicious of other people's giving. We tend to find fault with other people's giving. When I was a teenager, there were several magazines devoted to teenage girls, and some of them, at least one of them, had this monthly question that they would pose, and then you're invited to write in with your answer, and then the next month they'd publish some of those answers. Well, one month the question was, when you get invited to a birthday party, now remember it's a teenage magazine, but their audience is mostly 12. So when you're invited to a birthday party, do you try to bring a gift the birthday girl will want? Or do you choose something that you really like so it's good? Boy, howdy, the answers to that one were all over the map. And the only thing that was clear was that nobody had a handle on genuine giving and receiving. Self-sacrifice is often held up as the tenet of good giving, and unfortunately, that's very misguided. Self-sacrifice can become its own kind of competition. It can lead to feelings of martyrdom and resentment and burnout and overwhelm and anger. And it can lead to shame and self-judgment on the part of the giver for not being good enough unless they can sacrifice enough. And it can lead to criticizing the receiver for not receiving the right way, for not being grateful enough, for not acknowledging your sacrifice enough. And then that can lead to the receiver feeling controlled or manipulated. In all cases, we're too focused on micromanaging other people's giving and receiving to pay attention to our own balance and harmony. Or, maybe we're aware of being out of balance, but we blame other people for doing it wrong, and it's their fault we're out of balance. Or, thinking that if we can only sacrifice enough, maybe more, then we'll feel more balanced. And the bottom line is this affects the balance and harmony of everything within us and around us. It affects how we see ourselves, our self-esteem, our self-confidence, our sense of worthiness. Now, givers can be takers in disguise. Givers who have a kind of a what's in it for me attitude, I'm going to pause right there. Not a clue, not a clue, not a clue. Givers who have a what's in it for me attitude can never be satisfied. That approach leaves them always just grasping for more without the ability to appreciate what they have right now. They struggle with feeling grateful. Givers who are takers in disguise, they can sometimes be recognized by statements like, I did this for her, and look how she acted. She stabbed me in the back. I'm putting on my big girl panties, and I'm just brushing it off. She wasn't grateful. I'm putting on my big girl panties. I would never do that. Never, never, never do that. I'd love to hear the other side of some of those stories, but here are a few things to consider without even hearing the other side. The speaker or poster, because this stuff shows up in social media all the time now, but the speaker needed to be recognized for her giving. That right there tells you there were some strings attached. She needed to be acknowledged in a certain way, for gratitude to be shown in a certain way and to a certain extent. Come on, a little more, You're not there yet. Maybe not like that, but you'd be going, a little more. I don't think you've really risen to how much sacrifice I made yet. Takers subconsciously believe that they have to go after what they want and make it happen. So when they imagine a need is not being met, they go after filling that need by, getting or taking or fixing. I'll fix you. I'll make you behave better. They may see overgiving as a way to fix things. They can't see the potential for manipulation, or that overgiving might mean they're a taker in disguise. Now, granted, that kind of taking can come from neediness, but it's still taking in disguise. They can't comprehend concepts like balance and reciprocity because they usually see themselves as the victim. And even if they understand cognitively, they can't see how it might apply to them. Pregnant pause. These are all indicators of low self-esteem and low self-worth. People whose giving and receiving are out of balance, they're often jealous. They infringe on the rights and the space of others while blaming others for invading their space and their rights. They think you're the one with the problem. They will drain you of everything you have to give and still resent you for not filling their bottomless pit. Remember that if you truly have an overgiver in your life, they do think you're the one with the problem, and they will drain you dry trying to get what they need from you instead of dealing with it on the inside, and they will still resent you for not filling them up. And that pit is bottomless. Because it's very rare that takers can see their own actions clearly. In fact, most truly believe they're givers. They see themselves as generous. They're bewildered by the responses they receive. They can't yet see that they are coming from unconscious needs and self-interest and insecurity. Now, most of us, maybe all of us, are takers at one time or another, but take heart. The skills of balancing giving and receiving can be learned. And it goes along with the self-awareness and all that we've talked about. Just self-awareness is probably our most potent tool in our becoming. And let's pause right here and talk about becoming. You'll hear people saying things like becoming your next version or your next self. I think my perspective on that might be the opposite, because you're always you. What we're becoming is more reunited with our original wholeness. The wholeness is always right there. We can't be anything but whole. But what has happened over the course of a lifetime is we got hurt as a child right there, and that little child's kind of gone off in the corner and is still hurting. So it's sort of separated itself from the wholeness. Or as an adult, something terrible happened, something maybe traumatic, and that adult did the same thing. It separated itself and went over here and was nursing those feelings. Becoming is becoming reunited with your wholeness, is welcoming all these hurting pieces and parts of you back home into the wholeness. So even as we say you're becoming whole again means that you were born whole, you're still whole, and you're welcoming home all the pieces of you that haven't felt at home, even though they still were. That's probably a whole video in itself. Anyway, reasonably healthy people, they typically respond by sort of backing off and maybe declining to give anymore to a grasping person. And that could apply to that overgiver, just sort of backing off and not playing into this game of overgiving and sort of prostrating yourself on trying to fill them up. You can't. You can't. A heartfelt thank you, even if you don't like the gift, appreciate that it was given, but a heartfelt thank you and maybe paying it forward in some other way, balance, reciprocity. But this one was hard for me. So I personally, for a lot of my life, I personally was sort of in the headspace of giving more, really giving more of myself, not so much buying presents, but giving more of myself so they would finally notice me. And then they would give me what I wanted or needed. And that's really common for adults whose needs were not met as children. And if you're one of those, you, like me, really need to look at how giving and receiving feel on the inside. How do they feel on the inside? If you are susceptible to whoever overgiving and then feeling like, oh, I have to, oh gosh, Why are they doing this? I wish they'd stop. Whatever. Or, dadgummit, there they go again. I wish they'd stop that. I mean, they expect me to do more than I can afford to do, really more than I even want to do. I'm sick and tired of this. Whatever your reaction, that's a clue for you to look on the inside at how your own giving and receiving feels. Does any part of it feel icky? Does any part of it feel out of balance? And remember, paying it forward is part of the balance. Sometimes, when I was in chemo, I had breast cancer. It's been over 20 years ago. I had all these wonderful people taking care of me. I had friends who'd come water my plants and, leave something in the refrigerator that they thought I could eat. They'd come walk my dog. They'd drive me to appointments when I just didn't have the energy. Now, most of them did not need me to repay them in kind. But there are all sorts of ways that we can show kindness and that we can give. I can pay attention to them, and when they need something, I can step in and say, I can do that. Or in our case, my friend circle at the time, one of the other women was diagnosed with breast cancer the day I got my last treatment, when we were all at a little dinner party to celebrate the end of my treatments and to launch her on her journey. There's all kinds of ways to reciprocate and keep the giving and receiving in balance. All right, so let's do a quick recap of those 4 posts, okay? In the first one, this was the writer who had heard about the angel tree recipients always exchanging their gift for something else. She had expectations about how the recipients should behave and what they should do and shouldn't do. Expectations, shoulds, control, manipulation. But what if the recipient's needs or desires had changed? Or what if they got 2 of the same gift? Or what if there are so many possibilities? The woman who wrote the post, she had heard from someone who had heard from someone who had heard from someone, and she was willing to judge an entire program, I guess you'd call Angel Tree, but she was willing to judge the whole thing based on gossip and hearsay. In the comments, someone asked her, have you ever experienced this for yourself? And she said, no, I don't have to. Let that percolate. The second post was from a woman complaining about how disgusted she was with her family. And really, the subtext there is pretty simple. I'm doing it right, and they are all doing it wrong. She was disgusted with them. How is that? I mean, think about this. If her goal, if what she really wants is to see her family understanding giving and receiving, is being disgusted with them, confronting them, fussing at them, yelling at them, whatever, how likely is that to get them to see the beauty, the grace of giving and receiving? In the third post, all right, this was the writer who felt manipulated or maybe suffocated by that one relative's over giving. And in her post, she went on to ask what she could do. Well, I mean, a minute ago I said, just, thank her graciously, and then you just move on. Let the overgiving be her problem, not yours. You don't know where it's coming from. You may suspect, but you could be wrong. Thank her graciously, and then let the problem be hers. You cannot fix her. It's not your job. Remember this. you actually have zero control. For the most part, you have zero control over what gifts other people give you. I mean, yes, you can set boundaries, or you can give them a list or whatever, but you can set boundaries and gently tell your family and friends, but ultimately, it's the gift giver deciding how much money, time, and energy they want to spend and why. Even if you ask them to dial it back, you really have no control. Stop trying to control people. Let it be the overgiver's problem, not yours. You practice gracious receiving. And if that's not good enough for the giver, well, first make sure you've been gracious. That does not mean to their standard. Their standard might be gracious means you have to give me more than I gave you. Or they could be the opposite. And I have to give everything you can't get. I don't need a thing. I don't need a thing. Don't give me anything. I love giving. That is true sometimes, but it could also be a sign that their receiving muscle is weak. And you can figure that out by paying attention. Okay, what you do have complete control over is what happens to the gift afterwards. Now, this is where you can receive some free, this is where you can find some receiving freedom. It's up to you to determine which gifts are going to be kept and which are going to find new homes. Okay, what if Great Aunt Margaret gives you the world's ugliest, most expensive vase and then says, I can't wait to see it on your mantle next time I come over? Okay, don't justify, don't over-explain, don't eat yourself up from the inside out. Maybe just smile and then keep it simple with something like, I am sure we'll find the perfect place. I mean, realistically, how often does Great Aunt Margaret come over? And maybe how often does she come over with no notice? Okay? Think realistically, be gracious. That you can't make that other person change, but you can decide how you're going to respond. That falls under your work to do. So, you don't have to take it on board. You don't have to let you don't have to let somebody else's giving, kick your feet out from under you. Your job is to give graciously and to receive graciously. And that does not always mean a present wrapped up with a bow. Remember? In the 5 love languages, the author talks about all these different ways to show love. Well, what is love but a form of giving and receiving? One of the greatest challenges in life is learning to savor the giving itself. The giving is enough. No strings or expectations like the woman in the angel tree post, but simply giving and then setting both the gift and the recipient free. Practicing the fine art of allowing the gift and the recipient to find their own connection or not. This is actually the opposite of overgiving. You give, you set it free for the recipient. You receive, you express gratitude in return, or graciousness, and we're done. Overgiving, especially with expectations, pegs your feelings on someone else's actions, which actually puts them in control of your feelings. That last post that was criticizing the young mother who wanted to give back after she had been the recipient of really unexpected generosity. You have to wonder what happened to this person criticizing her that made them so suspicious? How much fear must they be harboring to see something sinister and wanting to practice gratitude and reciprocity, paying it forward? Why? What's happened to her that she sees that as a bad thing? And that's really the secret, really. Giving with no strings attached. That kind of giving makes us feel great. It energizes us, it renews our joy in giving, and it lets the receiver be joyful in their receiving. And if they're not, it's not yours to fix. Giving and receiving are designed to be symbiotic. They're a mutually beneficial exchange. And the grace, the absolute grace of giving and receiver is the giver becomes the receiver, becomes the giver, becomes the receiver in this one great continuum of reciprocity. That's the grace of giving and receiving. Now, I kind of broke my promise. I said I was not going to alert you to any of the clues, and then I kind of did anyway. That's okay. I want you to look inward. Look inward to find this grace of giving and receiving, and start feeling, thinking, believing that last statement. The giver becomes the receiver, becomes the giver, becomes the receiver, becomes the giver, becomes the receiver, and on and on and on. That's the grace. Bye for now.